Hey everybody, Russell Nobill, part of the election integrity team here at Judicial Watch. A big day for us here today. The Supreme Court announced a ruling in our historic case in Boss versus the Illinois State Board of Elections. We've been waiting on this for a couple of months. The court ruled with Chief Justice Roberts writing an opinion for us, 7-2 basically, in support of us. Justice Jackson and Justice Sotomayor would have ruled against us, but Judge Kagan would have ruled with us, or did rule with us. So we're very pleased with the outcome. This was our first Election Day lawsuit that we filed in 2022 against the state of Illinois, challenging their practice of allowing ballots to come in 14 days after Election Day. It's taken us 4 years for a federal court to acknowledge that we had a right to come to court and to sue over it. That was the ruling we got today. Backing up a little bit, we filed suit first in May of 2022. The court dismissed the case in July of 2023. It took us quite a while to get there. We did an appeal to the Seventh Circuit, which we lost, which is the intermediate appellate court. And then so last summer, we asked the United States Supreme Court if they would hear the case, and on June 2nd of last summer, the Supreme Court agreed that it would. The court heard arguments earlier this year in October, and this was a ruling that came out just this morning. What's interesting about this ruling is that it was the third or fourth opinion the court's released this year so far, which suggests the case was actually fairly uncontroversial. I think the ruling 7-2 by Chief Justice Roberts certainly signals that. With this ruling now, it'll make it a lot easier for us to get courts to hear our election integrity lawsuits. We're still going to need to win the substance and the merits of the lawsuits, but we feel pretty good about the cases we bring. We don't just take flyers. We bring cases we're very confident in. And so with this ruling today, we'll be able to get into court much easier to bring and enforce election integrity cases. And frankly, our other colleagues in the space will be able to do it as well. I've already received a lot of emails and text messages from other colleagues in the election integrity space that are very excited about it. The whole team here is pleased with how it worked out. We still have our Mississippi case where we won last October of 2024, where the Fifth Circuit ruled that Mississippi violated federal law by allowing ballots to come in a week after Election Day. That case is now before the Supreme Court. That was the companion case to this case, where we represent in Mississippi the Libertarian Party of Mississippi. The Mississippi case is currently being briefed and will be submitted for the Supreme Court to finally consider the arguments in the next couple of weeks. We expect actual in-person arguments late March or early April, and a ruling by the end of the summer or the beginning of the summer. We're very excited that federal courts will finally take a look at this practice, stop this practice of allowing states to receive ballots that come in days and weeks after Election Day. We go now to an interview that we just finished with our client out of Illinois, one of our clients out of Illinois, Congressman Mike Bost, who was a lead client on this case, and frankly the only one the Supreme Court wrote about today, because the Supreme Court said that he had more than enough standing for everyone else involved. So big day for election integrity. We found out the results in our case today.
Right. So now we can, it was really amazing that it was a 7-2 decision.
Yeah.
One of the more liberal judges in Kagan. And,
yeah.
Whenever we were actually sitting in there watching the process go through, my wife, surprisingly, whenever I called her, she said, "Kagan went with you," didn't she? And it was. She said I would read her face, and the state, whenever they were presenting their case, were not. She had a look that she wasn't accepting it.
Yeah, yeah. Did you ever think you'd have to go to the Supreme Court to get the Supreme Court to say that a federal candidate can have standing, standing to sue over its regulations?
Whenever we heard that the ruling of not having standing was strange. You don't want to agree. You might not agree with us on the case on the 14 days. You can the actual true
theory,
issues of the case. But as far as having standing, who does have standing?
Well, it's funny because for the first 250 years, it was really a non-event, right? Obviously, candidates could sue over the regulations affecting their election, and it really wasn't until 2020 it became an issue. And then since 2020, there's been all of this litany of bad rulings from courts that have said that. And so this case today, sort of once and for all, you allowing us to represent you for 4 years.
Yes.
After losing for 4 years, representing you for 4 years, and we finally get this ruling today, it's, the way we've just talked about it internally, like this is the rough end of plumbing. Like, it's not interesting, it's sort of difficult, it's tedious, but you have to have it, right? We can't do election integrity suits without
having you can't say the person doesn't have standing if they're the person on the field.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, you're affected financially, you're affected possibly in the vote tallies, all of those things, and you're going to have someone there to do the oversight of those votes coming in. But now we can move forward and actually hear the case. And my belief is that, of course, you don't know what the judges are going to do, but I believe we've got about as good a case as anything as far as. And then remember this: if ours goes, there's a case in Mississippi as well. That one's actually hasn't been ruled in the Supreme Court, but it's being heard right away. It'll
be heard in 2 months. That's our case. Your case was the first one, right? And so your case kicked this off, and because of that, other clients were interested in it, and so that allowed us to sort of get momentum to do this. And so now we haven't gotten to the merits. The merits being the actual why can ballots come in 14 days after election day, but this really
non-postmark.
Yeah, or any of them, right?
Right.
The ballots there has to be a cutoff. Baseball games have 9 innings. Football games have 4 quarters.
And I think it's important for your listeners to know and understand that prior to the law that was passed in the state of Illinois that forced this issue, and I was a military guy, you could vote when you were in the military. There was a process. There's a process set up federally that says 45 days prior to the election, you are sent a ballot, then you can have the opportunity to vote in the military. And that's anywhere in the world. And it wasn't a problem. But now all of a sudden they did this, and it just...
Yeah, there's a lot of, critiquing and criticisms that this is going to limit military voting. It will not. Like if a military serviceman or woman requests a ballot within time, they are guaranteed to get it 45 days before the election. And if they don't, then we can sue over that. And we have sued over that. So
my first vote of my life was for Ronald Reagan from Marine Corps Base 29 Palms.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was 19 years old, and I was in Marine Corps Base 29 Palms and sent my vote in.
Yeah, and it got
counted.
It was uneventful, right? And it's just sort of somehow with more technology and more ability, we somehow become less capable of getting ballots in on time. So it really doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, quite often when a lot of these bills get pushed forward, they don't give the respect to the voter that the voter deserves.
Yeah.
The voter, if you have a passion to be involved in the process, you're going to have the opportunity to vote.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that's sort of funny is that the polling on election day deadlines polls at 80%. So it's like, I defy you to find any issue in America where people agree at an 80% rate. There's not a lot of them, right? And so, I think everybody sees how this can be open to corruption or undermining elections. And so I think it'll be, finally get this resolved and explain why this can happen. Hopefully the court will strike it down and stop it from happening. Right. But at least explain to the American public and the voters of Illinois why we need to operate our elections like a banana republic, where you can keep counting ballots, keep receiving ballots until you get the result you want. It's crazy.
And yeah, that's that. Well, and
I don't want to get you spun up.
Well, if we start talking about voter fraud, we can name the counties that have the most voter fraud, and magically votes come up from the basement.
Yeah.
And one county I know that years ago. They always kept the ballot boxes on the back of the fire trucks at the fire station, and just about polls were about ready to close, there were a fire call, and they got hauled away. And that was in the state of Illinois.
I won't ask you which fire station. Let me ask you this: you found out today. Were you expecting it today?
I was not.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us were. You kind of think maybe it'll come down in a month and a half.
Yeah.
That's ended up what about it was. So.
I mean, I think the fact that it came down today, this was the third opinion the Supreme Court has issued for this term. The Supreme Court starts in October, so it starts releasing its first opinions. First one was last week, I think on Friday. We were looking for it today. We thought it was still on the early side. So I think that sort of illustrates just how uncontroversial this case is, right? The controversial, difficult cases get kicked off till June or July. This one's the third case they let. So it wasn't that complicated. As you pointed out, your wife saw, Justice Kagan agreed with us, and so I think, that really says a lot.
The state, because I sat there, we all sat there and watched, the state's presentation of the argument was really hard to defend.
Well, they had a hard position, right? But they just had some recent cases that they could rely on, but they really didn't have a great argument.
And whenever the state, the attorney for the state was asked by the head justice, she was asked, and because she said the argument was, I didn't have standing because I've won my last race by so much. And he said, well, what's so much? She said, well, the last one was almost 80%.
Yeah.
And he said, so where is your standard?
Yeah.
Is it 65%?
Yeah.
Is it 50? Where do you put it?
Yeah.
And at that time, the other judges began to go, you know what?
Just doesn't make any sense.
That doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make any sense.
I felt we were going to win.
Yeah.
I really did. But of course, I also feel we should win on the merits of the whole case.
Yeah, let's not get too excited, but yeah, I think we got a good shot. We'll know more. We're going to push this as fast as we can back in Illinois. We still have the case going on in Mississippi. So, Chief Justice wrote the opinion today.
Yep. 38 pages.
38 pages. His opinion was actually only about 6 or 8.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the dissent was 20 pages. Justice Jackson and Justice Sotomayor dissented. I'm curious to know. So you found out this morning. You're on the floor. I'm assuming they're not committee. Mm-hmm. Are people aware of it in the Capitol?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you know how with our social media, everybody wishes you happy birthday?
Yeah.
I got just as many of those saying congratulations.
Yeah.
And, my son, who's a sitting judge in the state of Illinois, his immediate comment was, I'm the only lawyer in the family, but you get to win a case before the Supreme Court. So there was, and many of my colleagues, Mike Turner out of from a member of Congress, who's an attorney himself, came up, and I was sitting in the chair, and he came up during the vote and said, "That's really cool."
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you never think you're going to hear your name in the Supreme Court. And you're sure don't think you're going to see your name on the actual agenda. And but it's been an interesting experience from that. But like I said, we're not done yet.
Yeah, and so we have this is the first sort of part of the election integrity projects that we've been working on. The first project, but this is sort of like a cornerstone of what we've been trying to do, trying to make sure we can get into court to enforce election integrity provisions. This case. From my vantage point as a lawyer at Judicial Watch pursuing election integrity, this is incredibly helpful. It's monumental in the sense that, we don't have to spend a bunch of days and, months, sometimes years. In your case, we spent 4 years litigating to get into the court door. 4 years spent litigating in the court door. People wonder why litigation takes so long. It took us 4 years just for a court to say that we can hear the case. And so in your mind, all that said, how do you see this help in the election integrity world going forward as you see it?
Well, one, if our case moves forward, everything that we can do, and thank you for the work that you all do here, because I'm telling you, the general public doesn't trust the election proceedings. This would be moving in the right direction because, one, you're following the Constitution on when Election Day is. And it is, if you give someone a chance to commit fraud in an election, they will do it.
Yes.
They will do it. And Illinois is one of the best examples of that. And matter of fact, there was one of our hearings back during COVID that after the January events, the Democrats decided in our VA meeting the radicalization of our veterans. And I was talking, and because you were on Zoom calls then. And so there was one of the more liberal veteran service organizations on, and they go, well, they said the radicalization of our veterans. And I said, I need to know what you think radicalization is. And he says, well, I said, for instance, I'll ask you, my grandson is in the Marine Corps, and he voted for Trump. Is that radical? He says, does he believe that Trump won the last election? I said, well, I don't know how he feels about that, but I tell you what, he knows and he has strong opinions for the support of Trump. He said, but does he believe Trump is the commander-in-chief? And I said, he's a Marine. He knows who the commander-in-chief is. Then he said, does he believe that there was fraud in the election? I said, man, he's from Illinois. He knows there's fraud in the election. So this, and that's been a common statement in our state, you know, about the fraud that occurs in Cook County and the fraud that occurs in East St. Louis and around. And so anything that we can do, or your group can do, to give people the secure feeling that they know their vote counts.
Yeah.
Because if you feel like your vote doesn't count, guess what you don't do?
You don't vote. Right. And, you know, I mean, that's what we're dealing with here right now. You know, you have the election's over, you go to bed, there's 400,000 votes. You wake up the next day, there's 450,000 votes. You go to bed 2 days later, you wake up, it's 650,000 votes outstanding. And it's not really a recipe for instilling confidence in the election. People will understand when they go to bed at night, there's 500,000 votes outstanding. The 500,000 votes have been received, 300,000 have been counted. We'll count the last 200,000. But as it stands now, no one really can tell what's going on. And so, you know, maybe some shenanigans are going on, maybe they're not, but there's no way to verify it. And so having a hard count on election night will go a long way to, frankly, you know, ensuring confidence in elections for people I really don't want to win. Right? Like, I mean, that's an important component of it. Like, I don't just, I mean, obviously I want my preferred candidates to win, but you also want to know confidently that the elections were held properly and people can handle losing.
Yeah.
And that was what, you know, frankly was so crazy, problematic about 2020 and what this case was, you know, subsequently resolved. You know, people didn't like some of the theories and the lawsuits brought up in 2020 before the election or right after election day. That's understandable. Not everyone has to like them. But people were frustrated because the courts wouldn't give them an answer. Right? If people can handle bad news, at least in our view, and, you know, obviously we're very, you know, strong on election integrity. It's very important that the elections, you know, you have a clear understanding of the count and how many ballots are out there. But, you know, people can handle the bad news.
They can. But there are so many other things we can do, and now I'm talking like a member of Congress or a member of former state legislator. The argument for not having voter ID makes no sense.
Oh, it doesn't make any sense
whatsoever.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to have an ID to drive a car. You've got to have an ID. The list goes on and on, but you can't. One of the most important things you do is vote for our leaders, and there's no ID check. You
know, back to what you were saying a minute ago too about this. You know, this idea that there's no shenanigans going on in elections. It's you know, people in America, you know, people cheat at everything. You know, not everybody, but some people would cheat at everything. And so this idea that somehow people just don't cheat in the electoral space is sort of silly.
And I know we don't, but we can give cases. For instance, if you'll remember in 2000 and the election of 2012, or 2012. Jason Plummer ran for this seat that I hold now.
Mm-hmm.
Jason was winning, hands down, in every county.
Yeah.
You go to St. Clair County. East St. Louis has an election board. There were precincts that were voting 110 to 115% of the registered voters, which finally then made the State Board of Election go, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Well, he lost. Well, East St. Louis back then had 15,000 people to vote there. Now they have about 6,000 people because they went through and purged the records.
Yeah.
And they were all voting.
Yeah.
But they weren't there.
Yeah.
And it was and kudos to the State Board of Elections for getting that done. But how many election cycles did that affect people?
Oh yeah. I mean, it only crops up in the close elections.
Right.
Right. That's, you know, it's hard to really know what's going on until you get a close election, and then you really see where the problems are. I mean, going forward, what are you hopeful in the sort of the election integrity space? There's some efforts on the Hill to sort of, you know, go after illegals registering and all that. I mean, the SAVE Act.
Making sure that the people that are look, I want every person to be able to vote that is a citizen of this United States has the right to vote once.
Yeah.
Once.
Yeah.
Okay. So the election integrity as far as what we can do from the federal government. Federal government, we got to make sure they're U.S. citizens. That's one, because every time we turn around, we carried the one bill to stop the D.C. from allowing people who are here that are not American citizens to vote. Can you imagine? Now think about this, and your listeners thinking about this. If you are at an embassy, then you're here as our guest, working in government. They want you to be able to vote in the D.C. elections. that makes no sense.
No, it doesn't.
So definitely that from the federal, but we have to remember that we don't want to do what the Democrats did, which was actually take what they proposed doing this, and that is a huge takeover by the federal government.
Yeah.
We still leave it up to the states.
Yeah.
But we need to know where the states are at.
Yeah, yeah, and so we think today will go a long way to allowing us to enforce existing election integrity laws, and people like Congressman Boss. We really greatly appreciate the opportunity to represent you.
Well, thank you for doing so. I mean, I think we're headed in the right track. This is a very hopeful beginning, and we've got a little longer way to go, but this was a very good result.
And we're not done yet. We still got this case back to the 7th Circuit. So we're going to see if the federal courts in Illinois will give us an answer. And in the intervening time, we're going to press the issue at the Supreme Court. Hopefully the Supreme Court will give us a final answer, and we will know by June of this year why, if states can continue to receive ballots after Election Day, and if so, then why. But we're hopeful the Supreme Court's going to put an end to that. We really appreciate Congressman Mike Boss and our other clients for letting us represent them. It's been a very long time coming, and we're greatly appreciative of it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.